Lesson 3, consumer outcomes. Outcomes happen along the consumer's decision journey and the path toward a sale. And they are very important for any brand to measure as they try to influence behavior of that consumer. 5 things that are important for us to know. Consumer outcome measurement seeks to determine the value of marketing on important business outcomes like revenue, sales volume, and market share. Measuring outcomes can be straightforward for fully digital businesses who have great access to data. For other businesses like a CPG, a consumer packaged good brand, and someone operating in that industry, there have been they've historically had difficulty in measuring behavior as brands' online relationships drive really hard to track offline behaviors. But measurement is still evolving there and getting better. The mobile location industry, it really began as a way to customize apps and target ads, but it is also now a very important measurement tool for what we would call micro-conversions, those sorts of activities, outcomes that consumers demonstrate before they make the ultimate macro conversion of a purchase. And then finally, it's important to keep clear the relationship between metrics and objectives, which range from resultant business objectives all the way down to tactical campaign goals. We'll talk a little bit about that. So we are looking at the 4 categories of measurement. We are focused on consumer outcomes at this point, which are these activities that brands are trying to drive. Ultimately, again, a macro conversion of a sale, but there's a number of different steps leading up to the point that are pushing that consumer along their journey toward a sale that are important to measure. If you are an online business and you can see a consumer from the time that they click on, say, a search ad and land on your site, and then clearly measure the behavior there, that becomes a pretty closed loop decision journey for you to measure, and you have perfect access to data. If you are someone like a Kellogg's, say, or some consumer packaged goods where you are driving online behaviors and building relationships with consumers to drive an offline behavior, that offline behavior becomes a little more tricky for you to measure. But measurement is evolving in these spaces, and there's a couple ways that a CPG brand might look at measuring some of those outcomes. They can take a view at a geography or a store level is one way. On the other side, they could look at a household or a consumer level as well. When they're looking at a geography or from a store perspective, there's behavioral data that they can collect, and those are sales. That's the easiest thing for them in a market to just collect. They don't know who necessarily are accounting for those sales, but you can very easily, with a well-designed geo-based study, determine if marketing sent to one area is driving sales while withholding that marketing to another is impacting sales, and doing some comparison there. It's not perfect. You don't know, again, from a consumer level, who is actually participating and is being influenced by those ads, but you are getting the end result of that macro conversion collected and measured. Taking a different perspective from a shopper, there are a couple things that you can do here. You can do behavioral tracking for many, particularly micro conversions, like a store visit or something. Using location data allows the brand to see who is winding up in their store. It doesn't really tie them back to a purchase, but many brands, if they wind up in their store, they know that a purchase is imminent, or that's about the best that they could hope for. That can easily be mapped back to some kind of online exposure of an ad, and then the value can be collected there. But another somewhat trickier way to go about this is just through consumer surveys. This is what we call claimed data, where a consumer is actually asked, hey, we saw that maybe you went to a shop. What did you buy, right? And getting that consumer to offer up their data. That is tricky for a couple of reasons. One is that you don't really know the accuracy of that claimed behavior, but it does get you insight that is otherwise difficult to earn. These are ways that that brands that, again, have a conversion offline are leveraging online data and other techniques to get a better sense for what those behaviors are, those outcomes. Location, I've talked a couple of times about store visit, and this has become a very important element of almost every marketer's measurement approach, particularly those who have retail locations, and they want to know, are consumers winding up in my stores or my movie theaters or on my auto dealer lot, right? Measurement of location is tracked in a number of different ways. There are location signals sent off by devices. So your iPhone, your Android phone are sending that information or collecting that information. The apps within that phone that you're carrying are, many of them, collecting location data as well. And then there are a number of different ways through Bluetooth beacon signals or Wi-Fi strength patterns and other ways that brands can use device signals to determine consumers' locations. Much of this is the center of a great deal of privacy regulation that's happening right now, and there are actually a number of kind of nefarious approaches to collecting location data. But safe to say that knowing where consumers are, which again was important for targeting ads, is now becoming a very important measurement tool for brands as they seek to determine is their marketing actually driving some kind of consumer outcome that's important to them. When we think about what brands ultimately want to do, down to the ways that they can actually affect those outcomes or those results, there's a clear line really between, at the highest level, a business outcome, and then what marketing can do to drive those outcomes, what media can do to enable that marketing, and then at the lowest level, what campaigns might set out to do. Each of these become levers that can be pulled to ultimately change the highest level result, which is a business outcome. Those business outcomes can be thought of as revenue, volume, or profit. Any company has really three primary objectives that it wants to drive. Those are outcomes, right? They're not necessarily goals. They're outcomes of doing something else, something else well. And in our sense, in digital marketing, it is those marketing objectives that we want to drive. We either want to stimulate demand, build awareness, influence consideration, improve a sales process, reposition a brand, or increase loyalty. And if we are doing those things, they will result in increased revenue, growth in sales volume, or improved profit. The media tools or objectives that we have that sit below those marketing objectives, reach and frequency, engagement, conversions, these sorts of things drive us toward those marketing objectives, which again ultimately result in a CBO. And then we should be setting objectives at a campaign level as well. All of these measures are seeking to measure some kind of consumer outcome, right? They might not be the ultimate outcome, they might be steps along the way. But when we can measure those effectively, we will know if our campaigns are being successful by utilizing the right media objectives, driving us toward the marketing objectives that we hold, and ultimately resulting in the business outcomes that our clients want.